All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to talk about a powerful story. A story about an act of gratitude so intense, so completely over the top, that from the outside, it just looked like a shocking waste.
I mean, think about that for a second. What would it actually take for you to thank someone in a way that other people would look at you and say, whoa, that's too much? That's the core idea we're digging into today. So, let's set the scene. Picture a dinner party in a little town called Bethany. But, this isn't your average get-together. It's a celebration. It's being hosted by two sisters, Martha and Mary, for their brother Lazarus. And the guest of honor? It's Jesus, because just a little while before this, he had raised Lazarus from the dead. So you can imagine the mood in that room, just electric with joy.
And right in the middle of all this celebration, Mary does something that just stops everyone cold. She brings out this jar of incredibly expensive perfume, and she doesn't just dab a little. She pours the entire thing on Jesus' feet. And then she does something even more stunning. She lets down her hair, a huge deal for a woman back then, and uses it to wipe his feet. And in an instant, the entire house is just filled with this beautiful, powerful scent. It's an act of just profound humility.
Okay, so to really get how huge this moment was, we have to understand what was actually in that jar. Because this wasn't just, your everyday fragrance. The text calls it pure nard. Now this was 100% pure, top-of-the-line luxury import. The nard plant, it only grew in the Himalayas, so that means this stuff had to be carried all the way to ancient Israel. It was unbelievably rare, and because it was pure, not some cheap version diluted with other oils, it was absolutely the real deal. And the amount she used was just wow. The text says it was about 12 ounces. To give you an idea, think about a tall-sized coffee you'd get from a coffee shop. That's about how much liquid she poured out. This wasn't just a drop or two. She emptied the entire bottle.
So, what's a massive amount of super rare perfume actually worth? Well, the text gives us a very specific number, 300 denarii.
And this is where the sheer scale of her sacrifice hits you. See, back then, 1 denarius was the standard wage for a full day's work for a regular labor. So 300 denarii wasn't just a lot of cash. It was an entire year's salary. Mary poured out what could have easily been her life savings, all in one single, unrepeatable moment.
Now, as you can probably guess, not everyone in the room was moved by this incredible display. In fact, someone immediately spoke up with what, on the surface, sounded like a pretty logical, pretty reasonable objection.
It's Judas Iscariot who breaks the silence. He basically says, what a waste. He points out that this perfume could have been sold for a full year's salary, remember, and all that money could have gone to help the poor.
And, let's be honest, it sounds like a fair point, doesn't it? It's practical. It sounds charitable, even noble. Why spend so lavishly on one person when that same resource could help so many people who are struggling? It creates this very real tension, right? This clash between extravagant personal gratitude and practical public charity.
But the story doesn't let that seemingly reasonable question just hang in the air. It immediately pulls back the curtain and shows us that this voice of reason was actually hiding a much darker, much more selfish motive.
The difference between what he said and what was in his heart is just staggering. Publicly, he's talking about waste, about charity, about helping the poor. But privately, the guy was a thief. He was in charge of the group's money, and he was regularly stealing from it.
And the text is just brutally direct about it. It flat out says his concern had absolutely nothing to do with the poor. Why did he say it? Because he was a thief. So let's be crystal clear here. His logical, reasonable-sounding argument was nothing more than a cover for his own greed. He didn't see an act of worship. He saw 300 denarii that could have been put into that money bag, where he could have skimmed his cut. For him, this was all about a missed opportunity to steal. Okay, so now that Judas's cynical motive is exposed, we can turn back to Mary and really try to understand the principle behind her seemingly crazy act. What on earth would make someone do something like this?
You see, her motive had nothing to do with a cost-benefit analysis. It was this purely overwhelming, personal, emotional response. Her brother was dead, gone. She had mourned him. And now, because of Jesus, he was sitting right there, alive, at the dinner table. How do you put a price on that? You can't. To her, a year's salary was nothing compared to having her brother back.
In this story, it gives us this incredible picture of what this kind of deep gratitude looks like. It's not about logic. It comes from a personal experience that people on the outside just can't measure. It always involves a real sacrifice of your money, your time, maybe even your pride. And it values the relationship way more than any kind of transaction. And that, right there, is why these kinds of acts are so often misunderstood or judged by people looking in from the outside.
But here's where the whole idea gets expanded in a really powerful way. This kind of intense gratitude isn't just for the party after the miracle happens. It's actually presented as a powerful tool to use while you're in the middle of a tough time.
This idea is driven home in another passage from Philippians. It says to present your requests with thanksgiving. Now, just think about that for a second. You're asking for something, which means you don't have it, right? You're in a state of need. And yet, the instruction is to ask with gratitude, to be thankful even as you're asking. It's a total perspective shift that seems just as illogical as Mary's act did to Judas.
And that leaves us with this final, really challenging thought. What if the very problem you're facing right now, the thing keeping you up at night, the thing you desperately need solved, is actually your single greatest opportunity to practice this kind of transformative, life-changing gratitude? It reframes our struggles not as burdens, but as launching pads for a kind of faith that, to the outside world, might just look a little excessive. Thanks for joining me for this one.